Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Uh, on day 9, I'm happy to report that we have made some slow but steady progress. We have a moment ago moved on to box number 5001, which represents the commencement of the recount for district number 5. That says of necessity that district number 1 has been concluded, but for one ballot box. Uh, as you'd recall, on the first day that we commenced this exercise, there was a ballot box that was discovered to be flooded with water when the container was opened. Almost the entire commission did a view of the ballot box a moment ago. The ballot box the contents are being dried. As optimistic as I'd like to be, I'm not sure how much will be retrieved or how much of the content could be retrieved from that box to ascertain for the purposes of a recount. But I'd say that it's not a significant issue, because in any event, from that ballot box, they would have emanated a statement of poll. And why I'm so comfortable to rely on the statement of poll for that box is that in the 98 other boxes that were counted for District 1, there has been no significant change in the contents of the box insofar as it is juxtaposed to the statement of poll. So in the scenario that we cannot retrieve the contents of the box after it is dried, etc., to count it, then we can have resort to the statement of poll. The other issue that we've discussed and that is of import, this morning at shortly after 10 o'clock, we were visited by a team from the Public Health Department in relation to our request to increase the number of stations within this facility in keeping with the COVID-19 guidelines. The team, we identified, I think, about 7 or 8 locations to the team. And the team was accompanied by the entire commission, as well as a representative of the Guyana Police Force. Those stations were pointed out. There were some discussions in relation to the suitability, etc., of those stations. And for the most part, there is some consensus on the placement of those stations. We now await, we are informed by the members of the public health team who visited with us today that we'll get a response or from their, or a report rather, from their visit as early as tomorrow morning. So we're anxious to move forward with the increase in the number of stations, and as a consequence, we look forward to having that recommendation or that report come to us for consideration, so that we could implement that in short order. In terms of the further speeding up of the process, we have, as I indicated earlier on, we have reviewed the items that will be checked as part of the ballot box checklist during the recount exercise. It is my opinion, and an opinion that is shared by other members of the commission on both sides, that we were checking certain aspects of the box that were not necessary. For example, we were checking to see whether the presiding officer returned a 6-digit stamp, unnecessary to a recount procedure. We were checking to see whether the presiding officer sent back their seal, unnecessary as well, and stuff like that. We've also looked at reducing the time by analyzing the documents that we will look at. And most of these ballot boxes, we've done in excess of 350 boxes at the close of play yesterday afternoon. And no anomalies were found, no major anomalies to report were found. Absolutely none, if I can say that. They were all very minor, minuscule, and Nothing that was of any moment or significance to alter materially the results of any one of the boxes that was checked. And it was determined even prior to the start of this, unless there is something that requires a more thorough examination of the content of the box, and unless it becomes absolutely necessary, it ought not to be done. So we reaffirmed that position today, and we took it a step further to identify the aspects that are and can possibly be considered to be superfluous, and we dealt with those accordingly. The other issue that seems to be recurring is that of the optimal use of the evenings. Yesterday, I understand that the evening hours were utilized a little better than they were the previous afternoons. And this is particularly taking into account the previous decision to utilize smaller boxes closer to the afternoon. You'd also appreciate the fact that at any one time you'd have a limited number of small boxes for a region, so after a while they become exhausted. They were counting, the report from the CEO is that most, if not all, of the stations closed either shortly after or very close to the 7 o'clock hour. The reason that is a matter of concern is because if you keep missing each station, losing or not utilizing effectively an hour and a half, sometimes as much as 2 hours on an afternoon, at the end of the day you're almost losing a day's work or the equivalent of a day's work from a station, and that can add up to causing issues down the line. So I'm happy that the CEO was able to report that there's been more effective use of that. I also indicated prior that there were several requests for meetings from the stakeholders. Those meetings were postponed somewhat to facilitate these developments that we're currently working on. That postponement continues to be in effect because we have not been able to reach the decisions that we have, that we need to. We're hoping to have that report from the COVID-19 task force tomorrow, and to implement them as soon as possible. As I'm dealing with the COVID-19 task force, as we speak, we continue to have a blackout on information in relation to the arrival and perhaps the permission from the COVID-19 task force for the observers, particularly the CARICOM observers, to arrive. With each passing day that the permission is being denied to the Carter Center, or my apologies, for the Carter Center observers to return, it seems as though hope of their returning is fading, particularly in light of the attacks by one particular stakeholder against the preliminary report of an electoral observer mission, that is to say the OAS, to the OAS General Assembly yesterday. So those meetings continue to be held in abeyance. And finally, in the essence of expediting or making our process in the stations more effective, I did indicate to you earlier on that we try to have a collectanea of recurring issues that arise in the polling station, counting stations, and we've had that reduced to a list, which we're fondly referring to as a basket of issues. That list is being updated every day. I think we are down to we're up to 20-something issues now. The last one being added was the last issue being added was these amendments in what will be checked in the polling stations, the amended checklist, as it were. The necessity and utility of that, of course, is that when an issue arises in the polling station or the counting station, there is no requirement to have to escalate it to a supervisor or to the CEO or to perhaps even the Commission on every occasion, because it is something that was decided upon, and it is only a matter of referring to that decision of the Commission. So, all in all, yesterday we've had the highest number of boxes done, and we're progressively getting there. The day before, we seem to have fallen back on one by that day. We're hoping to have that steady progress continue today as well.
Mr. Ganaraj, you mentioned some, okay, besides the consideration of some rejected votes as valid now, are there any other disparities or anomalies, I don't know what the right words to use, that GECOM has validated so far?
One of the big issues that there were is the issue of the 6-digit stamp. There were a number of issues on elections day in relation to the 6-digit stamp. That caused issues throughout, and there was an uneven application of the rules in relation to that. That, I believe, is one of the greatest changes, because you had, in some places, a lot of rejected ballots, etc. And because of the decision that we took, we were able to have that remedied and continue. So, lots of, in some cases, that were rejected ballots became valid and was applied to the respective parties as a result of the decision we made earlier on, recognizing the issues we had with the 6-digit stamp on elections day.
Mr. Conrad, given the recent decisions of the Commission, is it likely that they will amend the order to accommodate these new decisions, such as the increase in workstations and the deduction from the checklist, removing of the last 3 items on the checklist?
As I speak to you, I can't recall if the number of stations is included in the order. If it is, and I'm taking your word for it, if it is, there may be need for an addendum to reflect that. Could be done very simply as the order was gazetted, overnight perhaps. If we decide on it now, tomorrow morning it could be there. It's no big deal. In relation to the changes to the checklist, I don't believe that is necessary, because if you look at the last whereas clause in the preamble of the order, it caters for that sort of an interpretation that will allow that reduced scrutiny. Well, it's not really reduced scrutiny yet. It is really an act of efficiency, because if you read the order, it says, and as necessary, and we are not removing that element of necessity if it becomes an issue. So I don't believe that, like you said, the number of workstations is in the thing, and I'm taking your word for it. We may need to gazette a very simple one-liner to say that the order that is published on the 4th of May is amended to reflect the X number of workstations. Not a big deal. But the other one doesn't require further gazetting, I believe.
Mr. Conrad, in relation to the wet box, what are some of the other possible options that can be taken by the Commission to deal with that?
The only other option, a lot of our discussions today at the Commission in relation to that wet box surrounded the drying of the contents. Lots of suggestions. Blow dryer, putting it in the sun, etc. I made the suggestion that the statement of poll could be used. It was met with very slight opposition, but it is not off the table as yet. And I believe that is the most viable option at this time.
Do you think using this statement of poll set a precedence for any similar incident that come up during the recall?
I don't think that it sets a precedent, and even if it does, it is not a faulty precedent, because it is not a faulty precedent, or it's not a precedent that should be abhorrent to the process. Because, like I said, if you look at the trends, uh, there has been no significant changes in the results, particularly from that district, district in relation to the statement of poll and the statement of recount. Any differences that were discerned in between were merely because of issues that can easily be explained. For example, I mentioned a moment ago the 6-digit stamp. In some instances, you had valid ballots that were rejected, that were deemed as rejected, because of very simple issues, issues that touched and concerned decisions, that issues that were the subject of decisions that we made at the commission, which would have resolved those. So, in that case, for so far in that district, it's an isolated case. I don't see any major issue in utilizing the statement of poll. In fact, I am and will be strongly advocating for the use of that.
At what point do you reverse to that, to advocate for? At what point do you decide, let's use the statement of poll?
As we are this afternoon, and as we speak, this afternoon in the tabulation, which starts in an hour or 4 o'clock, the entirety of Region 1, except that one box, will have been tabulated. So I don't see an issue where that the contents of that cannot be utilized.
What about calling a by-election?
I don't believe that the law caters for it. For the calling of a by-election in those circumstances. 2, I believe that the recount process is more of a verification of the results, and that is what it has served to do so far. Verify the results that this country already knows, and it up to now, with 350 odd boxes concluded, there has been no marked changes except in the boxes in Region 4 where Mingo did his bingo. There has been no marked changes in the contents of the statements of poll and the statement of recount. In fact, so far, but for a few, like I said, very cosmetic changes, all of the statements of poll match all of the statements of recount. What the difference is, and you've seen this being made public, is where the RO for Region 4, Claremont Mingo, and his staff called out different numbers in the presence of hearing of everyone, including myself.
Who has been comparing that statement of poll to these coming out? Because it's not GECOM that's comparing.
No. The statements of poll are public document, as you know. 2,339 polling stations, by law, posted in a conspicuous place outside of the polling station after the close of poll and preparation of the statement of poll outside here. Anyone, me, you, if we have a well-trained pet, could have gone and taken a picture of it. It's a public document. It was all over.
But you're saying it matches.
No, I'll get there in a second. These statements of recount are being publicized on a daily basis as they are generated. It's a live streaming process. Screen grabs are being had of them, etc. I have, as in my own capacity as commissioner, have received almost 2,000 of those statements of poll. I have been doing my own matches because statements of recount, if you notice me leaving it most afternoon, I'm carrying a large pile of documents in my hand. Those are the statements of recount that I'm entitled to receiving as part of the order that you referred to a moment ago. So I have both piles of documents. There are several people who have both of those documents as entitlements, or by extension have access to those documents. It can be any number of people. I see even the media houses have been doing the comparisons and reporting on them.
So using those numbers, have you been able to ascertain Mr. Golding's claims with regard to claims?
Which one of Mr. Golding's claims in specific? Well, yes, in fact, the strongest of the claims which I repeated, and I said this last evening, that Mr. Golding said something that I believe many of us were thinking, that this was a most transparent attempt at a rig of an election. It happened. We all saw it. We all saw it. We saw what was happening, and I referred to this in a question asked by you a few days ago, Kamora. On the 13th of March, sitting at the Ashman's building, not in the front by the RO's office, in the back by where the media center was, on that day, because they moved it all over. On the 12th it was in front, on the 13th they moved it to the back, then 13th afternoon they moved it to High Street. I was sitting there. I had in my hands piles and piles of statements of poll that I received, and I heard them being called differently. So, Prime Minister Golding has not said anything that is different or shattering outside of what we all observe. He and his team, like any one of us, would have observed that as well. And it is just a recording and reporting of an observation.
Prime Minister Golding referred to 4 specific ballot boxes, numbers 4062 to 4064 and 4074.
Right.
Have you seen those specific SOPs?
40. I wouldn't want to commit myself to, if I am not mistaken, I should have those 4 SOPs in my possession. I believe I do. But like I said, yes, I can't commit to those 4 numbers because I don't specifically recall them, and without having that document in front of me, I don't want to readily say that I have seen them, but it is very likely that I've seen them. I've had all of those documents.
Mr. Glenraj, in the crafting of the recount order, to what extent did you make representation for against the provision that requires the commission to first determine whether the chief elections officer should use the data to compile a report to send it back to the commission?
That is the first day that that order was published. I was asked a series of questions, and I still hear questions being asked on it.
Do you agree with that provision?
Let me answer it in a little longer way rather than answering it in a dichotomous manner. What would have been preferable is that when, for example, Region 1 is done this afternoon, that is put at the start of a pile. By the time you reach the end of Region 10, the results would have been there, and the results will be known by everyone in any event. Region 1 this afternoon and the other regions as follows. I don't see a huge problem with that, because what else are you going to use? There is nothing else to use. The purpose of this recall is to determine the results of the elections. I don't want this to sound like a mantra I'm singing. I don't want to look at bogeymen where they don't exist.
Mr. Gunraj, Mr. Alexander was here a few minutes ago, and he stressed that in presenting this order, you would have acknowledged the existence of the 10 declarations, at least to have them in a legally binding document, and the order allows for the results to be accepted or not.
You know, like I said, I don't want to see bogeymen where they don't exist.
No, there are 2 provisions.
Right. The observation reports, some persons are perhaps hoping, will have some effect or impact in militating against the adoption of the recall, the numbers generated by the recall. I dare say that the numbers generated by the recall are and will be the results of these elections. Simpliciter. There is no wiggle room for consideration, etc. If a contrary position is presented at a time subsequent to now, then I will deal with it. As I stand here, the results of this recount will be the results of the election.
But this ultimately leaves it to what is essentially a politically divided elections commission, which is now being asked whether it should be, the data should be used by the chief elections officer. What if by majority that they say no, it should not be used?
I would want to, I don't want to speculate at this time, but like I said, I have a position on it, like I've just adumbrated, and I don't want to bury my head in the sand like the ostrich, but when that bridge comes, we can cross it. But I believe...
Are you running from possibly not addressing this matter frontally in the commission?
No, I don't, and I'm not running. I don't have a difficulty in raising it in the commission if it becomes necessary. But at this time, I would prefer, if we focus our energies on the execution of this task that is at hand, and to addressing the issues that crop up from time to time, and resolving those issues and having this process concluded in a timely and efficient manner. When that is done, we can deal with that.
So you never failed to address this matter properly in the commission?
I wouldn't say that I failed to address it properly.
So you had advocated for the language to be automatic? Because it's not automatic in the language currently. Had you advocated that Mr. Lowenfield should automatically prepare a report and give it to the commission for its consideration?
I would have. I have advocated for that. As you know, the order took a very long time in coming, weeks perhaps, and there were lots of changes back and forth, etc. And I did say on the 4th, when the order was published, or shortly after it was published, I may not have been happy with all the elements that are contained therein, but there is an order and there is a process ongoing from that order. If there are issues arising from that order, we will deal with it when they come up. But to answer you again, Dennis, it is not something that I'm running from. It is, I'm prepared to deal with any aspect of this as and when it becomes necessary.
Because of the language in that order, there becomes now a likely scenario where GECOM could not use the results of this recount and maybe revert to the 10 declarations that we currently have. There's a scenario. Would you acknowledge that could happen?
I don't agree with that, because the discussions in the commission which we have publicized is that the results of this recount process shall replace those declarations that are currently in the possession of the chairman.
But Mr. Banraj, you would accept that at the end of the process there is a formal decision to be taken on whether to formally accept them. And should they not be accepted, then the only thing standing is Mr. Mingo's declaration.
Respectfully, I think that I have touched on that, and unless something new comes out of that, like I said, I don't want to look at bogeymen where they don't, or find bogeymen where they don't.
But the opposition leader himself has expressed concern publicly about this.
Well, sorry, I'm not the opposition leader, and if he
but
is,
it's a party to which you belong.
right, and if he is,
did you adequately represent this point on behalf of your party
and
properly?
I've answered that, yes.
But
yes.
you didn't get your way.
It's 2 days ago when you weren't here, Dennis, I said that GECOM is supposed to be a democratic body. In a democratic situation, a majority rules, and if I am bound by the decision of the majority.
Mr. Gunraj, a question I raised with Mr. Alexander earlier. The commission itself has not been too resolute in dealing with allegations of fraud, even with investigations that it would have done. And I pointed out 2 instances, the Region 1 proxy voting issue at one of the local government elections, and the fake SOPs that found themselves in the tabulation center. What is the reason
Which
for this?
which fake SOPs?
In 2015, the very questionable SOPs that found themselves in the tabulation center that Mr. Serge Valley was very vocal about on several occasions. The commission seems to be failed to address any issues like this because it points back to the system you have in place. Why is the commission, has not frontally addressed some of these issues?
In relation to the first issue of issue with proxies, I am aware that there was an investigation conducted, and as far as I can recall, when it came to the commission, it was determined to be a non-issue. In relation to the fake SOPs, it's been 5 years, but my advocacy for that has not ended. 5 years later, I still have made demands to at least see those SOPs, to which CEO Lowenfield referred, and I was unable to. But the same thing that I said to Dennis a moment ago, that it's supposed to be a democratic organization, and successive chairmen from Serge Bali to Patterson, that I can tell you that issue was never raised with Justice Singh, and it might have been raised only tangentially with Patterson, but Serge Bali voted against release of that. There was precious little I could have done. As you're aware, there's an elections petition that was filed in which those fake SOPs was a central issue, and 5 years later it has not been heard. So to apportion blame, while I do not reject the idea that GECOM is not without blame and is perhaps very blameworthy in the diligent prosecution of that issue, perhaps the court which is charged with responsibility of dealing with that also should take some blame, because 5 years later, the petition which ought to have had those issues ventilated has not been heard.
What did Serge Valley vote against? The Region 1 report or the...
Region 1, the Region 1 issue did not arise on the Serge Valley. It arose on the Patterson, and like I said, on the him it was determined to be a non-issue. That is the extent of my recollection. I can't recall the details, but because it's a non-issue, it really doesn't take a prominent place in my mind in relation to all of these other things that we have to deal with. But the 2015 SOP issue, you'd recall the very thing that is now being requested, the release of the SOPs, all of the SOPs, was also blanked by Serge Valley in 2015.
So the onus is entirely on the court to deal with issues of fraud, is it?
I wouldn't say so, but if the commission, the majority of the commission refuses to deal with it, then unfortunately my hands may be tied.
Mr. Alexander had spoken about there being a necessity for a provision, or actually a decision made for a provision a while back, that GECOM would blacklist deviant or incompetent officials who worked on election day.
Right.
Why has GECOM not been taking up that specific procedure of late?
I'll resort to one of my my mantras on this. Where there's a will, there's a way, and where there's not, there's an excuse. I'll be the first to say that GECOM has abjectly failed to deal with those issues in a condign manner. And reports after reports of persons being made, and they are not investigated, persons are not dealt with, and I believe that the failure of GECOM to deal with those issues in a severe or even uniform manner has caused the system to be circumstanced in such a way that enables persons to try these things over and over again, the latest being Mingo.